Welcome to Lead Your Life, the podcast for people who are seeking harmony in business and in life. My name is Debbie Heiser, and I'm an inner mastery and business mindset coach and the chief igniter here at the Lit Up Life. I feel an urgency to help people let go of past messaging so that they can make a lot of money doing what they love without sacrificing what they value most. Welcome. We're glad you're here.
Straight from the corners of my mind is where I find my sanity. It's a place,
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Lead Your Life with Debbie Heiser. I am really thrilled today to have Miss Whitney Coupland on with us, coming from Canada, and I'm going to let her introduce herself a little bit more. But I really, as you know, because if you've been listening, I like to explain where I met Whitney. And Whitney and I met through an international networking group called Fem City, which I highly recommend. There's local chapters as well as online. And we set up a coffee chat, started talking, and she is doing something and immersing herself in this work that I've become really interested in recently. And it's called human design. And she's going to go further into some things called gene keys. And so we're going to talk a little bit today about what human design is, how Whitney got into it, what are the gene keys, and how does that fit into this universal law of gender and having masculine and feminine energy. So Whitney, I want you to introduce yourself and then let's just have a conversation.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me on. So yeah, I'm Whitney Coupland. I'm in Vancouver in Canada. And I'm going to take you back just in this introduction, I think to when I was 18 years old, because it's going to kind of tie in with the rest of the story. When I was 18 years old, my parents handed me a newspaper clipping, and it was for a job at a bar and grill type restaurant, not too far from our house. And they said, Whitney, you really need to get a job. I had been working in summer camps from the age of probably 15, but they're like, okay, you're entering university. You're going to need some money. This place is hiring. Why don't you go on down there and see if you can get an interview? So I went down there, got an interview, and became the hostess until I turned 19. And then I started serving beer and wings. And the reason I share this story is because I met this man who really changed the trajectory of my life. He ended up becoming my very first boss in my very first career. And it was selling expansion joint waterproofing to architects and engineers. Yeah. So he basically opened my eyes to the world, to entrepreneurship, to different perspectives. And it was through that job that I started traveling across Canada to Vancouver, which is where I live now. And every time I would come to Vancouver, I would feel, and at the time I didn't really pinpoint this, but it was my intuition speaking to me. I would get on the airplane to come back to Toronto, and I would hear this voice and have this feeling of, you're leaving home. You're leaving home. And so as that expansion joint waterproofing job became less and less appealing to me, I started to explore the world of nutrition and health, which was an interest of mine. And I ended up moving out to Vancouver to pursue that job, or not job, but education, and then eventually start a business in that field. So I just thought it was so interesting, because you like to talk about universal law, that synchronicity of my parents finding a newspaper, job ad, which led me then to meet this man who opened my eyes to a different worldview, to traveling, not only in Canada, but in the US and Europe, and that my life could be so much bigger than what I thought it was going to be, which was working a 9-to-5 and potentially living down the street or in a neighborhood close to my parents, and having kind of a life in my own, neighborhood that I grew up in. And my life is nothing like I thought it would be.
Yeah, that's so fantastic. And it fits right into too this idea that the universe is always for us, right? And there's miracles that happen all over the place. We sometimes just don't recognize them as miracles because to your point, that particular newspaper ad, like I don't think anything's random, right? And there are
Mm.
signs all around. And I think that's part of too as we get into human design. And so when you think about that trajectory changing and you were in the nutrition field, what got you into studying about human design and now eventually the gene keys?
Yeah, so after I went to nutrition school, I tried to start my first business. I was in my mid 20s at the time, I guess. And it was a very quick wake up call of it takes a lot to start a business and to actually be successful. And that was in 2013-ish, I would say. So it wasn't this whole online world with online strategy. It was me trying to build a local business with people that I would meet with face to face. And I quickly realized that wasn't going to be successful. I just didn't have the skills at the time. I was good at sales and talking to people because I came from that background in the waterproofing job, but there was going to be so much more to it. So I ended up working for a couple of different companies in a startup role, so business development. And after my second maternity leave, I thought, hey, I'm going to go all in. I'm going to leave the world of working for other people. I'm an entrepreneur at heart, and I'm going to start this health coaching business. So my first business was actually in health coaching, and I did that for about 2.5 years. But as many entrepreneurs do with that first, business that you start,
Yeah.
you hit a place where you're like, am I in the right business?
Yeah.
Because something was not lighting me up about it. And I would be in these different coaching containers and masterminds, and I would hear what these other coaches were doing in their businesses. And something in me had this sinking feeling. I was like, I love health. I love nutrition. It's so near and dear to my heart and the way that I live. But I don't think this is the thing that I want to help people with.
Yeah.
And so I
Just
went
got a
into
big
the
realization.
void.
Yeah.
I went into the 8 weeks of like, okay, well, if I'm really going to leave this health coaching thing behind, what am I going to do next? Because I know I'm going to be a coach. Like that is in my gene keys and my human design. Like it just screams, you're a guide, you're a leader. And so I knew I would stay in this space, but what was I going to help people with? And again, thanks to the universe, when I enrolled in my very first business coaching program, like as a student, there was a woman offering a beta free session for a human design reading. And at the time, I had no idea what it was, but I reached out to this woman and I said, I'd love to take you up on your offer. And so she gave me my very first human design reading. And I loved it, as people do, love learning about themselves.
Right.
But I realize now that I teach and coach with human design that it wasn't presented in a way that was tangible and practical.
So it
So
was
I ended,
more earthial, like theory.
yeah, it was just like, this means this, and this means this, but not asking me questions like, where is this showing up in your life? How could you think about this differently?
Yeah.
What's an action that you could take based on what I'm sharing with you right now? So I tucked that away in my filing cabinet and didn't think about human design again, probably for a couple of years until I started hearing about it on podcasts and I don't know where else, but it started showing up again. And again, that voice was like, okay, it's time to go deeper with this. You need to buy some books, start looking into this. And so I had done that and been studying human design and the gene keys for personal interest for a couple of years. And when I entered that void of what am I going to do next in coaching and how am I going to help people get tangible results in their life, I really had to actually step into that feminine side of myself and surrender. And
Yeah.
so one day I was sitting out on my front porch and I was like, I've been doing this for 6 weeks. I sit out on my front porch, I have tea, I listen to podcasts. I'm like, not today. Today I'm going into my office because I have my meditation area set up. And I'm like, I'm going to write a letter. I'm going to write a letter to the universe. And I'm going to say, hey, I'm ready, willing, and able to serve. I'm smart and capable. What is it that you want me to help people with? Let's not waste any more time here.
Yeah, I love that.
And so eventually, I don't know the exact moment, and I've tried so many times to bring this from my subconscious. Like, when did I get the answer? Sometime within the next week or so, I got the answer. Take human design and the gene keys and bring it to entrepreneurs and help them understand themselves better, get in touch with their legacy work, the work that they are here to do in this lifetime, and so that they can bring it out into the world in a way that really supports them while at the same time having massive impact.
Great. And so Whitney, that's a perfect way to segue into this. What is human design for those that are listening that have never heard of it, or maybe they've heard of it, but they're not really sure what it is? Can you describe that for us?
Yes. So human design is a system that helps you understand yourself better. And it is based on your birth date, time, and location. So it's completely unique to you. The system was actually brought to the planet through a man named Ra Uru Hu in 1987, my birth year, which is also ironic. And he basically brought the system in a very, I don't want to say convoluted, because it makes a lot of sense, but it's in a certain language that not everybody can understand. And so in our conversation today, I'll make the language a lot more accessible. And so this really complex system that provides you with something called a body graph chart can give you insight into things like how you're designed to make decisions and what your natural strengths are, what your biggest challenges or life lessons will be. And so this system can help you not only in your business, but in your personal life, so that you can actually show up the way you want to show up and use your energy in the most effective way based on how you are designed to interact with the world.
So when I think about that, I think about all of these different preference tests and personality tests and all of that. What makes this different than that?
Yeah, so this is really interesting. The way that I like to think about this is when you take a personality test, it's your conscious mind answering those questions, what you know about yourself in this moment. Human design is a remembering of who you actually are, your energetic blueprint.
Yeah.
And the way that I like to use these systems, because you never want to take something like human design or the gene keys and use it against yourself, where it's like, oh, well, I thought I was this way. And it's saying that I'm not designed to be an entrepreneur, or I'm not designed for things to flow, or whatever it might be. It's like, no, let's take this system, and there's going to be key things in it that speak to your subconscious mind. And it's going to help you remember and bring forth information that's always been within you. So that's the difference. It's like the subconscious mind versus the conscious mind, and what you think you know about yourself versus who you actually are.
Yeah, I love that. And so there's a piece of me that wants to say, okay, kind of explain some of the general things, because I know there's verbiage that's out there around generators and manifestors and some of those types of things. Can you just give us an overview of how this breaks down, and then what are the gene keys and how did those fit into that before we take a break?
Okay. So in human design, it's like an onion, layers. You have to go in layers. And so what people usually will tell you, if you say, hey, what's your human design? They're going to say what their energy type is. So there's 5 different energy types. And because humans like to categorize things, we come up with these attributes for each of these energy types. So somebody might say I'm a manifester. So I'm an ideas person, and I'm here to just bring forth innovation, and then have all of the generators, the busy bees, do the work. And it's hey, maybe, but that's a little bit oversimplified. I like to say that no matter what your type is, no matter what your design is overall, you are capable of doing anything you want to do. Human design is just going to give you your personalized roadmap to doing it in a way that actually aligns with who you are, what you value, and your unique energetic makeup.
Yeah, and it's interesting, Whitney, because as you speak, like most of the listeners have heard me talk about universal laws and they all kind of intertwine, right? And so even as you're
Mhm.
talking, not only this universal law of gender, but I'm thinking about the universal law of rhythm and how, for me, I found out my energy type is a generator, which some people would say that's no surprise. But yet it was a surprise to me because I've always said my dream job would be to be in a padded room and come up with ideas and then have minions go execute on it, right? Like, and so realizing kind of the makeup of that has allowed me then, because I also didn't realize, because as I've been studying, this is very complex stuff, folks. And so as I've been like just getting into it, one of the things that surprised me about a generator, and this energy source is needing to step back and respond versus always like being the one in the forefront.
Yeah.
And so that has actually made a huge difference in how I've approached things in the last few months. And it's interesting because as that energy source, I'm noticing I have more energy because I'm not rubbing against something that is kind of seeping energy away from me. Is that what you find with people when they start into this?
Yes, absolutely. I like to use the analogy of a tire and how when you're not living in alignment with your energy type, you're getting these little punctures in your tire. So eventually it's deflating. And if you can move into alignment, and you mentioned responding, so each energy type has their own way of interacting with the world. And when you get that down pat, you can start to really sift through so that you are committing to things that you truly and authentically want to commit to. And you're saying no and opening up space when things are not aligned with you. And the next layer of that is your authority. So that's how you are designed to make decisions. And there's 7 different authorities. The most common is emotional authority. That's roughly 50% of people. And so emotional authorities are not designed to make spontaneous decisions. They want to make sure they are making decisions from emotional neutrality. And that means not only emotional lows, but you don't want to be making decisions from an emotional high either, because we as human beings are energetic beings. And when we're in the frequency of other people, we are so easily influenced by their energy. So if there's excitement in the room and you decide to commit to something on the spot, but you're an emotional authority, you might have to go back and cancel that plan or back out, which doesn't feel good. Where if only you had taken 1 to 3 days to kind of let your emotions settle, you would get your true answer. And then you're likely to commit where you want to commit and decline where you want to decline.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, so there's the energy bodies, then there's the authorities. What else is important for people to know about like some of the human design structure? And then we're going to take a quick break.
Okay. So you have your energy centers.
Mhm.
And the energy centers are, if you've heard of the chakras, they align with the chakra system. So in each person's body graph chart, they're going to have these shapes. And each of these shapes represent one of your energy centers. And whether they're colored in or not means something about you. So when something is colored in, it means you have a lot of energy in this center. And when something is not colored in, it means you're more open to being influenced in that center. And people always ask me, well, like, what's better in everything, right? Like, what's better? Which type is better?
Right,
Which,
right.
defined or undefined? And it's like, nothing is better. It's just different and it's just you. So the
Just
undefined energy centers, those are your areas where you're going to experience a bit more challenge, most likely, because you're picking up on things outside of you. But if you practice self-awareness and learn more about yourself, you will actually become so wise in that energy center that you'll be able to go out and guide others based on what you've learned. And again, that's not to say that if you have a colored in center or a defined energy center that you can't be wise and you can't experience change. It's just the way we talk about it in human design. And it really is going to vary based on your life experience and, you know, all of those good things too.
All the filters too that we tend to put on.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay, folks, we're going to take a quick break and then we're going to come back and dig a little bit more into these gene keys. Let's talk about something every entrepreneur faces: selling. It's one of the biggest topics I hear from my community and clients. How can I sell without feeling the ick? I get it. And that's exactly why I created an ebook that guides you through the same script I use to grow my business year after year by leading sales conversations with heart and soul. If you want a selling approach that feels right, head over to thelituplife.com/ebook and grab your copy today. Now, let's get back to today's episode. Okay, welcome back, folks. What a great conversation we're having here about human design. And I want to shift now just a little bit into, because there's kind of a, I don't want to call it a layer, but there's almost like a secondary piece to this. And I don't even know if I would call it secondary, but a complementary piece to human design, which you introduced me to. And that's way down on my list because I'm like still learning the human design piece of it, but is the gene keys. Tell us a little bit about, like, what is that?
Okay, so there's going to be similarities and differences in these two systems, human design and the gene keys. What they have in common is that they both present you with a chart based on your birth information. So where human design is presenting you with this body graph chart, the gene keys presents you with something called a hologenetic profile. And your profile at this point in time, because it's being expanded, right now there's 11 gene keys on your profile. And they all sit in different planets. So that's the astrological component of it. And the gene keys is, I call it the more feminine side of this exploration, where you are really getting to know your shadow tendencies or how you operate on autopilot and how you can actually contemplate those frequencies about yourself to step into your gift energy. And eventually in the gene keys, there's 3 phases. And I guess they're not even really phases. You just kind of cycle through. I'm in gift energy, I'm in shadow energy. And then there's something called Siddhic energy, your Siddhi. And that is like your total conscious state. And so very few humans are in that state all the time. We get glimpses of it. So really in my work with my clients, I'm focusing on the shadow. Like, what are the things in life that are holding you back? What kind of patterns do you tend to fall into when things aren't going your way? And how can you stop looking at that as a negative attribute or thing about yourself and starting to view it as the fertile ground for like birthing your work into the world and really showing up and living in your gift energy? So there are 3 sequences in the gene keys. The first one is about activating your genius. And no matter where you are on your entrepreneurial journey, you can still learn more about what your zone of genius really is and how you can hone in on that to really bring I call it your legacy work into the world, where you're not just dabbling here and there, but you're really hitting the nail on the head of what you came here to do. So that's what the first sequence is. The second is about opening your heart. And that's really so that you can show up in service to use your natural gifts. And then the third, which I love to work with, it's called the pearl. And it's how you create prosperity in your life, in your business, through being of service. And so we can get into that if you want to, but there's 4 spheres in the pearl sequence that are really applicable to business and entrepreneurship.
And so, Whitney, when we're talking about how this applies to entrepreneurs, but if you're not an entrepreneur, this also works for you, right? Like, it's not just that, but because Whitney focuses on helping entrepreneurs, and so do I, that's kind of what we're talking about. But what I love about this, and I don't know that much about the Gene Keys, is that it does feel like this is more about the receiving. And I love that idea of like finding your genius. And I just think about how much faster people can get out of frustration. Because I don't know about
Mhm.
you, but I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs that are just frustrated because if they're getting ready to start a business, they're trying to figure out what do I want to do? And I take them through some exercises to figure out what their genius is and that type of thing. And then once they figure out what their genius is, it feels like this kind of flows into then how do I open my heart to receive? How am I showing up in service? Like it just all
Mhm.
of these things seem so like how do I say this, like foundational. And that's what I use in my practice. So, not necessarily the gene keys, but like this foundational, you have to understand like what your spiritual DNA is in order to
Mhm.
feel super fulfilled and keep, it doesn't mean that if you don't know your spiritual DNA, that you're not fulfilled, you're not happy, you're not grateful for the life that you have.
Mhm.
But I find that the more in alignment I can get, then the more energy I have, the more um I'm able to step into my calling. And that's what I
Yeah.
hear you doing in this. And so when you're working with entrepreneurs or people, like what's your first, like you do the body graph chart. Now, do you also then, as part of that, do the gene keys? Like, how does that work for you? What do you do?
Yeah, I always run both charts for a client. And when I first started my business, I did things more structured. And
Mhm.
then as I became more experienced, I thought, I'm going to give this person what they need based on what they're coming to me for, what they're presenting with. And that could be somebody just coming for a reading and they're not an entrepreneur. They just want to get to know themselves better. Or it could have to do with a really specific business challenge. So I run both charts and human design. I say I won't work with the gene keys without human design, at least at this point on my journey. Like things could change, but
Yeah.
human design just gives you the backbone. It helps you navigate your intuition. And
Yeah.
without that, I feel like you can't really move forward authentically in your business. So that's the
Yeah.
first thing that we learn from your design is how do you get in touch with your intuition? And then I dive into the gene keys for the purpose, the life's work, what
Yeah.
drives you, what motivates you. And there's something in your gene keys called your evolution. Your evolution is the thing that it's a theme that prevents you from fully stepping into your life's work. So whatever shows up in that sphere on your gene keys chart is going to be one of focus, especially in your work with me if you're an entrepreneur, because we want to see what is that shadow tendency that stops you from going out and
Yeah.
fulfilling your purpose. Even if you think you're in it, everybody has that little thing that they're holding back on, and you can gain a lot of insight from that gene key.
Yeah, and Whitney, do you find, I know a lot of clients I work with, and it breaks my heart that, and I know I was there too, and I still sometimes don't trust my intuition, but we've, I find like this conditioning that happens where I was so out of touch with my intuition
Mm-hmm.
that, I mean, it was a class at Gonzaga during my master's that actually tapped me back into it. Like I've always had a spiritual connection, but this like intuitive hit where I trusted myself to listen,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like meaning that I would have the intuitive hits, but then I would question, is this the right way? Is this? And that it just breaks my heart sometimes when I'm working
Yeah.
with people when they don't trust their own intuition. And like,
Mm-hmm.
how do you, how do you help people with that? Because I would imagine that has to take place before, I mean, they can understand the other pieces and the pearl and getting tuned in with their heart and all of that's going to help their intuition. I guess what I'm asking is, do you find that too? And how do you help people through that lack of
Mm-hmm.
trust?
Yeah. So first of all, the human design is called an experiment. It's called the human design experiment for a reason, because it takes experimentation. It takes, okay, I'm listening to this feeling or this thought or whatever, however you're connecting to your answer. I'm going to go for it this time and I'm going to see what the outcome is.
Yeah.
And I've noticed, because I'm a manifesting generator and I have sacral authority. So my gut speaks to me in the moment. But with more experience, I've learned I also have an open emotional solar plexus. So I pick up on people's emotions like crazy. So for example, in business, when I want to make an investment, if I'm on a webinar, I get so swept into that. Like, I'm excited. I feel the energy. I want to join.
Right.
And then I often do join. And sometimes I take a step back after and I'm like, oh my goodness, that was an ego-based decision. So an important distinction with intuition is knowing what an ego-based decision feels like and what an intuitive-based decision feels like. And oftentimes the ego is so sneaky. It will just convince you that
Yeah.
you're following your intuition. And so it takes so much time. Like, I've been in this work for several years and I still catch myself making ego-based decisions because I feel excitement in my body. And I'm like, well, it must be my gut response speaking to me. But
Yeah.
now, like, as you go and you learn more about your design and how your body and intuition operate, I know I need to do a triple check. So I'm on this webinar, I'm feeling these vibes, I want to join something. Okay, great. 15 minutes after the webinar, how am I feeling?
Yeah.
30 minutes after, how am I feeling? And you will come up with your own rhythm and your own way of tuning into yourself to know what's right for you and what's not. But it is not the flick of a switch. Like, it just takes experimentation.
Well, and part of what I hear you talking about is a lot of what I coach too, where we need to slow down to speed up, right? Like, it's important to take the pause, take the breath, wait
Yeah.
15 minutes. You know, a lot of times if it's a big decision, I like to get out in nature, take a nature walk, do a meditation. Sometimes it's like, yep, I know, and I go in and I'm great with it and I make the decision quickly. And other times I do need some time to resonate on it.
Yeah.
And to that point, then it's trusting. It's for me, it's like an art and a science, right? Trusting that the vibes that you were feeling and that you were excited about it, that excitement is still there, and not going into this, oh, buyer's remorse thing, but also then looking at and trusting that intuitive hit to say, you know what, that's probably not right for me right at this moment, right?
Yes,
Um,
exactly.
and it doesn't mean that it has to be forever. It's not right. It could be some other time, but yes. And I
Mhm.
find there's a fine line, right? That art and science to it. And it just takes, to your point,
Mhm.
practice. And just like anything, I found the more in tune I become with myself and my intuition, the more stable I feel, and actually the more energetic I feel and inspired. So Whitney, thank you so much for, sharing with us kind of the basis of this. And so I want to make sure that we have your link in the show notes. And so if someone wanted to learn more about what you do, they were interested in finding out more, maybe getting their human design and gene keys done and read by you, where would they go to find that?
So everything is on the homepage of my website, whitneycopeland.com. But if you are super eager to learn your human design, you can go to myattractioncode.com. And that's going to give you your specific human design body graph chart. And if you are an entrepreneur, I've actually written it through that lens where it is really applicable to business, but it's also very applicable if you're not an entrepreneur. So don't be fooled by my content that says this is only for entrepreneurs, because if you just want your human design body graph chart, you can get it there too.
Okay, fantastic, Whitney. And I always love to end with a couple of questions that I kind of preempted you with. So, if you had to recommend a book that you felt like was pretty instrumental in your life, what would that be?
It's funny that you ask this question, because I don't know why. Sometimes I have this thing. I'm like, if I ever go to jail, what will I bring? Because you hear about people like reading the Bible in jail. And I'm like, no, I would bring the Gene Keys book by Richard Rudd.
Yeah.
It's the 64 Gene Keys. And it will keep your brain amused probably for a lifetime.
That's good to know. I might
It's
have to
like
look.
this thick, and you can You can use it in so many different ways. You can use it as an oracle as well by opening up the book to specific pages. So I just absolutely adore that book.
Awesome. And then if we were to open up whatever platform you listen to music on, what would be your most played song?
I think it's David Guetta. I'm Good, because I start my workouts with that. So I play it a lot.
I might have to do that when I go do my workout early tomorrow morning. So thank you for that. Well, folks, thank you so much. And Whitney, thank you so much for being here today and sharing your expertise. I can't wait to dig in even further as we continue to grow and develop our relationship even. And with that, folks, it's a wrap. And please look in the show notes. Go out if you want to the myattractioncode.com and get your reading. So with that, have a great week and we'll talk again soon. That's a wrap for this conversation. I'm so glad you've joined us. Remember to subscribe to the podcast so you can catch all of our future episodes, and visit us at thelituplife.com for details on how you can become part of the Lit Up Life community. A quick shout out to my friend Jackie Wilson and her friends, the creators of our amazing theme music. Thanks so much for allowing us to share this perfect song with our listeners. Looking forward to having you listen in to our next episode.